Thank you all for staying. This has been already a wonderful morning, and we try and kind of pivot into our keynote speaker in the middle of the day so that we kind of retain you, number one, because I can't tell you what an amazing presentation we're going to have today. I know that Dr. Cotton, who I invited several months ago to come and present to us, has been putting a lot of time into this, and I think you'll be appreciative. So that is being said, I am very honored to present to you our keynote speaker today. Is going to be Dr. Robin Cotton. As you all know, he's a leader within the field of otolaryngology. Next slide, please. I've had the opportunity, there's a slide before that. There you go. I've had the opportunity to be with Dr. Cotton as one of his fellows, as many of I see in the room, and I see the room is becoming more populated with his fellows in the past. He is an amazing leader, as Dana mentioned earlier today during her speech. Dr. Cotton came to us from Cambridge as a medical student. He was a resident in general surgery at the United Brigham Hospital. He then became a otolaryngology resident and fellow at the University of Toronto, and then now subsequently landed at Cincinnati, and that's a whole story in and of itself. But landed at Cincinnati Children's, of which he's really become, in my mind, and I'm sure in many others, the preeminent pediatric otolaryngologist of our time. So to have him come and present at SENTAC is an amazing reward to us, and really a testament to what SENTAC has become. He, as you all know, he basically perfected airway reconstruction for children, newborns, for their complications of tracheostomy after birth. He has been a leader in many ways within our field, and I can't even mention all the awards that he's won, but he was an early leader and past president of SENTAC, as you all know. He was the president in 1980. He was also been a president of other other societies, including the ABA in 2001. He was first, though, and the reason we've asked him to come today, in the spirit of our diversity, equity, and inclusion, he was the first really to develop the interdisciplinary team, or the multidisciplinary team within pediatric otolaryngology. As you all now know what an aerodigestive center is. It did not exist until it was created in Cincinnati. And now all of our hospitals across the country have aerodigestive centers, or aspiring to have an aerodigestive center, and that came from the innovation of Dr. Robin Cotton. He has produced many leaders, many of the chiefs within our discipline come from his fellowship. He's not only created leaders in our field, but leaders in administration, thought leaders within our field, especially within this interdisciplinary spirit of otolaryngology, speech, and swallowing disorders. He is a surgeon, amazing surgeon, a wonderful mentor, and has inspired many of us within this field. He's obviously a leader and an innovator, and I should note that, just on a personal note, I've seen him be an amazing philanthropist along with his wife Cindy. So it is a distinct honor and pleasure to bring to you today Dr. Robin Cotton as our keynote speaker for our 49th annual meeting. Dr. Cotton.
Well, guys, this is my lucky day. I promised myself 2 years ago when I retired never to give another medical talk of any sort, because I was tired of seeing the senior people hogging the microphone. And I've never been back into the hospital since the day I left, August the 30th, 2019. But I'm lucky to be here because of all the invitations I ever had to speak. Gresham gave me the most eloquent I've ever had, and I could not say no. So you're going to have to put up with me. And it's not a medical talk. It's essentially how multidisciplinary teams were created and how I was lucky. So let's see the slides now. Every voice counts. I think that is a really appropriate theme for this conference. SENTAC is diverse, certainly multidisciplinary. We look at the last two presentations today. It's youthful, which I love. It's nice to see medical students and first-year residents here. And there's a sense of urgency and freshness, and good things are going to happen in this conference. It's been an amazing conference, and thank you to the program committee and the president for putting on such a good conference. I understand it's probably one of the first to marry the hybrid, and I think it's worked extremely well. And I really enjoyed the last talk, the last hybrid conference about the telehealth. So, every voice counts. I like the second logo. I produced the first logo many years ago. I was not in the ground floor of SENTAC. That was developed about 72, 73, but I became involved in my first or second year of practice. So I've been not in the ground floor, but at the very first level. And I've enjoyed my association with SENTAC because of the multidisciplinary nature of it. I have nothing to disclose, other than to note there's a lot of polarization in our society today. There may be some discussion afterwards of what I say, and that's okay. And I was in London recently and reading the London Times, and it said, children, there's no such thing as good or bad behavior. Bad behavior is banned as a term. We have to use terms skillful and unskillful. Well, exactly what 5-year-old understand what skillful and unskillful means. So, I mean, even bad is not allowed now. And I commented last week on a reader in the New York Times who says, I'm exhausted by the constant need to be wary of what you say or how you say it or the words you use, or you'll be instantly labeled. And that's a real problem in this society right now. It goes to limited discourse, and that discourse should be open. Anyway, the objectives that I was set up to discuss was the foundation of a happy career, recognize how diversity is important, and know basically when to quit. So I was born in England, as has been discussed. I was educated in ENT in Canada, excellent residency. I was wonderfully trained there. And I think I've been able to repay my debt to there because we had 100 fellows, and 10 of them have gone back to Canada, or they're Canadians who I trained. So I feel as though I've had my debt paid there. Then I moved to the United States, worked there, took out American citizenship. I worked at Cincinnati Children's for 45 years. I succeeded the first 20 years despite the hospital, and I succeeded the second 25 years because of the hospital, because it allowed me to build teams. That was the key point. I have an English child, I have a Canadian child, and I have 4 American children. So that's diversity, I think, a little bit there. So what you see depends on where you stand. C.S. Lewis has said that, but Nelson Mandela is also quoted with almost the same quote. And it is so true. And for me to understand where I came from, and for you to understand where I came from and how it's influenced my thoughts and biases and attitudes, I have to tell you where I came from. I was born in 1941, basically remember a little bit about the end of the Second World War. And I was an athlete, and in 1948, the austerity Olympics. There was Berlin in 1936, where they had Jesse Owens with 4 gold medals, black person. In 1948, they had Fanny Blankers-Koen. She was a mother of 2, age 32, from Holland, and got the same 4 gold medals that Jesse Owens did. Now, there's diversity, again, right there. The cost of the Olympics there in 1948 were just less than £1 million, which is about $40 million, 40 million with an M dollars now. And there are great stories of, it was the cigarette companies were the biggest sponsors, cigarette companies, okay? There were stories of the Americans brought steaks by the freezer full and shared them with the athletes. The French brought a couple of carriages of wine with them and shared them with all the athletes. So it's a very lot of camaraderie going on at these Olympic Games. The recent Tokyo Olympics cost $15 billion with a B, $15 billion. That will put up 300 bedded hospitals, 300 bedded hospitals. It'll put up 1,200 schools, elementary schools in Japan. It'll buy you 40 jumbo jets. And think what that money could have been spent on just getting the world inoculated, which is much more important to me than a few athletes going and getting some gold medals, though that is important too, but we don't need to spend that amount of money when there's so much inequity going on. So 1950s childhood, I was brought up, memorable events for me was the ration card. We had rationing for food, gas, and the like in England until 1954. And when I was putting this talk together, it made me think maybe that's why I'm small. I was undernourished as a child because didn't get enough of a ration book. Radiograms at the top were a status symbol in the 1950s. There's a TV. We didn't get a TV in my house until probably I was about 15 or 16. That we just were not to be had, or people could not afford them. So I was taught to be grateful by my mother. I was a product of a single mother. Father was not in my life. She was educated, professional. She believed in education for women so they could take care of themselves. So she was, 20 years prior to Title IX, she was on this game in the early 1950s. And I learned how to be grateful. And I think, grateful is very healthy. When the administrators of the hospital do some things for me, I'm grateful. When they don't do something for me, I make sure they do something which I can be grateful for. And I think it's a healthy antidote to one of the scourges, I think, of prison society, which is an idea of self-entitlement. No one is self-entitled to anything, in my mind. You earn your respect and your living, and I was taught that from a fairly powerful, emotionally powerful, physically frail mother. So I have attitudes and I have biases, and I know where they came from. For instance, I know there's a whole science about it. I don't understand the science. But in England, I did not meet my first black person until my second day in medical school when I was 18. I met a black student from Ghana. And we recently read this book in my book club called Caste by Isabel Wilkerson, which equates Indian caste system to racial disparities in this country. And I thought, well, why have I not seen a black person? I looked and Googled up how many black people were in England in 1950. There were 15,000 out of 60 million. So it's not surprising I didn't see a black person. But the black person I met was a student, as a friend, educated. So that's my bias towards black people. And it didn't change until I saw the biases in this country where there is so much more racial history. And I wasn't an unobservant child, I can tell you that. I was a single child, 5.5 years of age. Christmas came round, and I thought, Santa Claus cannot exist. This is just not for the birds. And so I am a fairly observant child. So again, what you see depends on where you stand. And I stood in a very different youth than many of my colleagues who've come up in different ways. June of 1972 was a big month in my life. I just finished my otolaryngology residency, and I was going down to Cincinnati for a new job with Don Shumrick as a head and neck fellow. It was a new country. And I suddenly and abruptly became a single parent to two gorgeous children who you see there, 15-month-old and a 3-year-old. That was a big event in my life, and I was lucky. Now, Don Shumrick was a profound influence on my life. He was probably the father figure in many ways that I would have liked to have had. And he was chairman of the department of otolaryngology and asked me to stay with him to do head and neck surgery. And he put me in the VA for 6 months. Well, I can tell you, rapidly found that VA was not going to be my forte, and I asked him to move into Children's Hospital, and that's where he put me and where I've stayed. He mentored me so well, without meaning to mentor me. He said one-liners like, Robin, the first rule of being a leader is to act like one. And he'd say things like, the 3 A's of medical practice: be affable, be able, and be available. And he said, of all those, be affable. Where are we now? 45 years later, administrators putting up these little scorecards of how affable we are. This was taught to me a long time ago, So he also told me when I went into Children's, here's a fully trained head and neck surgeon going back to the University of Toronto to be a head and neck surgeon. Go into Children's, forget the ear. Forget the ear, it's yours anyway, Robin. You own it. No one else owns it. Go after the rest. And that was a part of my successful career when he told me that, and I did go after the rest. And he told me that leaders are made, not born. I understood that. And he was the first one to introduce me into the 3 tenets of an academic practice. Told me you can't do 3, you can do 2 well, but you can't do 3 well. And he taught me the criteria of leadership: work effectively, be good at what you do, have a clearly set of values, quietly work for the success of those around you. That's very important. And always take the hit for the team. If there's a problem, you take the hit for the team and you stand by them. Now, building a legacy, success means so many things, and I've just highlighted non-career related activities. I think non-career related activities are very important when you're working and certainly when you are retired. And what do I mean by that? I mean, develop your friendships, develop exercise as part of your routine in life. Go away with your children, support their soccer games. Leave your white coat at the hospital. My wife used to say to me, you leave the white coat at the door of the house when you come home. I said, nope, I left it at the hospital. I've had time to decompress a little bit on the way home, and I never taken work home. And the only thing that ever kept me up at night a few times when I was maybe going to lose an excellent staff position and how to retain that position. I learned that from Shumrick too. He loved it when one of his faculty bought a house because he knew they were going to stay in Cincinnati. And time management is another very important thing. Saying no to something can be enriching. We all tend to say yes. But if you say yes to something, you say no to something else. And don't say no to things like important work. Don't say no to anything which is healthy for you. Don't say no to time with loved ones. And don't say no to a little bit of quiet time yourself. All of us need a little quiet time from time to time. So time management, I think, is very important. Churchill used to say, and we've been to this one, haven't we? The ability to go from one failure to another with no loss of enthusiasm. That's difficult to do. And we've all had our failures. And like Schweitzer, success is not the key to happiness, but happiness is the key to success. And I think that is very, very true. I looked at a higgledy-piggledy leader. This is from an article I read a few years ago. And the new one, the new effective leader, gives all the right things there. You know, delegation. You have to delegate. I've had wonderful colleagues I could delegate to. Flexibility, adaptability, stamina. You need stamina. resolution, courage, visions, value, all the way around. But the one thing that is missing from this is common sense. Common sense goes a long way in life. And you can be very bright and have no common sense and not do well, or you can be not so bright, have a lot of common sense and do well. I don't think common sense is given the credence it should do, because there is a lot to it. And now, of course, as a leader, it's not the three, it's the fourth one, it's the financial one, as the financial incursions into our practice from industry, government, business, insurance companies. And that's not MDs, that's speech and language pathologists, audiologists, it's everyone in the medical provider field. There are so many books on leadership. Every CEO seems to write a book on leadership, and I've scanned through a few of them. This is one that I really enjoyed and find worthwhile reading. Manchester United Football Club, 1 out of 10 people on this planet are fans of Manchester United. 1 out of 10 far exceeds any other football, soccer, any other sporting club by far. He was the manager of this, and they did extremely well. And if you read the book, you can see his quality as a leader coming through, and it's a fun read. So multidisciplinary programs I've had the advantage to be able to develop. I have to say to the audiologists, in the time that I was practicing otolaryngology from 1972, cochlear implant has been the single biggest advance in pediatric otolaryngology. It is absolutely amazing what the cochlear implant will do, put in early enough to these kids who are hard of hearing. So I have to recognize Howard House and his group for doing that. I practiced from 72 to 95 without cochlear implants. 1995 when we started implanting some of our children. Plenty of patients, we need three things. We need a surgeon, we need an audiology, and we need a school for them to go to after they've left their surgery. So when the audiology is the most important part of that. The surgeon is pretty small part to play in this. Most competent otolaryngologists who can drill out a mastoid can put a cochlear implant in. So in 1995, we first sent our hard of hearing children to Dr. Miyamoto in Indianapolis, which is about 100 miles away, to get the implant done. Audiologists came through very quickly to put their program in for making the implants work and programming them. So they did that very quickly. And luckily, a couple of our early patients were their fathers, were businessmen in the Cincinnati area. So we need the third component, which is a place to educate them. So they put called the Higher Valley Voices, which is on the periphery of Cincinnati. And they, in the community, with everyone's advice, got this program going. And it's just an incredibly good school. So now we had, and I also hired, late 1990s, I hired Chu, Greenwald, and subsequently Arjman, who had 3 cochlear implant surgeons. And now they do about 100 implants a year, and talked to an audiology last week. They follow about 900 active cochlear implant patients, so it's a sizable program there. Ohio Valley Voices mission is to teach children who are deaf and hard of hearing to listen and talk. We believe when given proper tools and resources such as cochlear implants or hearing aids, combined with intensive early intervention, these children can reach their full potential. Goals: no child will be turned away for financial reasons, so there's a lot of fundraising going on. All children will use spoken communication as their primary means of communication. All children will read at or above grade level and achieve academic success. And the special needs children who are deaf and hard of hearing with secondary disabilities will be addressed so they can achieve goals 2 and 3. So I've done my part for fundraising. OVV, High Value Voices, There's a marathon in Cincinnati appropriately called the Pig Marathon. I don't know if Cincinnati is called the Pig City. It's called Porkopolis originally. Not terrible name. Anyway, it's the first Sunday in May. It's been going like for 25 years. So myself and my children, you can actually see your program chairman, third from the right on this slide. When she was younger, we would run the relay every year, and we earned a substantial amount of money for OBV, thanks to people in this room, my friends and colleagues who donated and sponsored us. This sort of activity also helped me to avoid burnout. I was lucky enough never to have burnout, and when it started coming along, I had to think about what it was about. And I think part of it is because I've been surrounded by great people, great residents, great fellows, great nurses, audiologists, speech and language. I've just been lucky enough to be surrounded by very good people. And that has kept me out of the burnout system. I was in London Heathrow a couple of weeks ago, and just looking at this slide, I took a picture of the magazines in W.H. Smith at the airport there. Mindfulness reminded me of two things to say. One is that one of my other daughters is director of the integrative health system at the University of Cincinnati. And mindfulness, I hear quite a lot about her. And mindfulness means so many to different people, but it's such an important commodity or important thing for us to do. I know when I run, things come to my mind. When I play the piano, nothing comes to the mind other than just play the piano, but it's part of my mindfulness. And my mind is totally concentrating on the piano when I do that. So one of the first teams I put together was voice. I'd previously put the VPI, velopharyngeal insufficiency team together in the early 80s, along with the speech and language pathologists at Children's. And that was a successful program, and I gave it over to Dr. Wilging to carry on. Then Karen Zur, one of our fellows who's presently division director at CHOP, is credited with really starting the voice program here. And Dr. Dr.Cotton is now taking it over as staff and taking it as his level of interest. I think vocal evaluation we all know about. Look at the bottom two. Voice in surgery in the airway, voice often takes a back seat to the airway. But you've got to really think of voice as a very important tool. My very last surgical case, by design, was on a 47-year-old male I've taken care of since he was 2-ish, with papillomas of the larynx. And he's had upwards of 500 procedures and every possible adjuvant therapy you can possibly have. But he keeps coming back with significant posterior glottic papillomas. And he gave me the privilege of being my last surgical patient, which is pretty cool, lucky. And he has a great voice. After all those procedures, he has a great voice as soon as he's had the papillomas out. So advancing pediatric voice, we categorize it obviously the basic science, clinical research, translational research. One of the coolest little projects one of my fellows did, Xian from Perth, he got some larynges post-intubation and found out, following intubation injury, there's very early fixation of the cricoarytenoid joints, fibrosis of the thyroarytenoid muscles. So a lot of the pathology which we as surgeons have to deal with is already created by initial event. And these, by the way, are the howler monkeys from the Brazilian forests. Their hyoid bone is very big and hollow, so they can really generate a lot of noise and howling, which you can hear long distances. Advanced pediatric speech and language research, as well as voice. And to do all that, you need a group of people, SLPs, audiologists, MDs, engineers, with nurses, developmental pediatricians, and others, and develop basic science, clinical research, and translational research. And we have been able to do some of that at Children's, and I've monitored how much has been done at other institutions. And there's a lot of advancing speech and language at our university department as well. This culminated in 2013 when we had the AQL meeting, a mandate for translation science. Open the airway, but try and preserve the voice. And now, as like in all good teams, I got this one specifically because the leader, there's more than one leader. There's an MD leader, speech and language leader, and there she is in the throne. So I was known for pediatric airway reconstruction, and about the the seminal moment for me to look into delivery of care was when we had a GI doctor who was running the feeding team left. I mean, abruptly left. And here we are with a whole bunch of people, kids who desperately needed help. And one of my colleagues, Dr. Paul Willing, rose to the occasion. And so this was the first really integration between GI and ENT back in the mid-90s. And he took that job temporarily. Well, now we are 25 years later, and he's still the leader of the feeding team. But that was the spark for me to think we cannot have just one surgeon doing these cases and one GI. You can't have a program which is built on just one or two people. So it made me think of how to deliver airway, GI, pulmonary issues easier to the group of patients that we saw. They were getting more and more complex as the years went by. So we wanted to build a better pyramid. And this pyramid works really well. It's multidisciplinary. It really works. We meet every Wednesday morning, discuss the patients. We then all go to the operating room together and scope the patients together. Then we go to the families and with the outcomes. And the reason we developed this was to be better in evaluation and treating these conditions. Instead of having my calling a GI as it did in the 80s, please come and do this with me, they're automatically there. To maximize the well-being of the child and to exceed parent expectations. And I partnered with the head of pediatrics, Dr. Tom Boat, who really helped me through these silos we heard about recently to go across the board here between in the pediatric specialties that we were most interested in, which is pulmonary and GI. So this is how the new paradigm started. Focus on the patient and family. No one had thought of that in 1999. That was not on the cards in healthcare. Now it's all the rage, and I'm proud to see that. Horizontal integration among the pediatric specialties and a spirit of collaboration. And now we had 4 airway surgeons. We have 4 pulmonologists, 4 GI doctors, all interested in this population. Never did I ever dream this would become a society. Never did I dream that it would become an entity that a lot of children's hospitals wanted to have. But I'm proud. It shows everyone wants to do the best they possibly can for these patients. This team would not exist without the nurses. Could not exist without the nurses. The nurses, the patients love their nurses more than they love their doctors. And these nurses would steer these patients and their families through the complex web of the hospital system and the aerodigestive team. And I have to thank the nursing team, which grew up by itself. So we built a better pyramid, and I'm proud of it. Next thing I'm proud of really is the fellowship program. Graduated 100 fellows while I was there. About 25 to 28 are in leadership positions either in this country, Canada, England, Israel, and Australia. And I'm very proud that myself and my colleagues have educated such a wonderful group of people who can then carry on the very good work. So objectives, diversity, we've heard a lot about diversity today. Very, very important. These are spontaneous slide from 20 years ago, the fellows. In your diversity, I've been lucky. Diversity has been come by appointing the best candidate for the position. Maybe it's because our pipeline is so big, but I've not had to choose one over the other. Just by appointing the best person has how my program has become diverse. We've got Romain on the left there. Is it your left? He's in Texas. Trina is up in Edmonton, Canada. We have Tiffany, who is in Houston. We have Sean, who's in Perth. We have Scott, who's locally here in Phoenix. And we have the inevitable and inimitable Deepak, who is in Texas, and all well known to us and a previous leader of this society. And they're our future. I could have done nothing of this, none of this, without help from my colleagues. Would not have been possible. And remember, when I say leaders are not born, they are made. And sometimes, I've had a conversation with a couple of you since I've been here, sometimes a leader has to take people where they don't really want to go. And that in particular includes hospital administrators. And you take them down the path you want to go until they see that that's the right path for them, and they will help you. And that's what I mean by the last 25 years, the hospital has helped me. But I've had the right attitude to take them down the path of where I want to go. And that's only a word of advice I like to say. I shouldn't have to put this slide up, you know. Should I be proud that I have 5 graduates of my program? Of course I should. But any graduate I'm proud of. If I go back to what my mother taught me, don't worry if they're male or female. So I'm hoping that 10 years from now, where our son is now finally in medical school and he's like 45% of the class, when I went to school I was 80% of the class, this will be the norm, and we won't even have to talk about it. So what I am saying is I need to put the slide in present context, but I don't think I really need to put it up because these are leaders. So the final objective is when to navigate the next step. And why is there no age limit to the aging provider in this country? Well, it stems from the Age Discrimination Employment Act in 1967. And I think our top civil servants with the biggest pay, Reagan, Trump, Biden, are in the 70s and close to the 80s, maybe. So they're pretty difficult to say you can't operate, you can't fly a plane, you can't do this, you can't do that. I think there's a difference between an aging physician in the broadest sense and a surgeon. I think a surgeon has to be particularly careful of his skills, dexterity skills, which do change as you get older. But, you know, one out of 4 physicians in this country is 65 or over. So I want to talk for 1 minute about Bob Rubin, who I hope is watching. Bob Rubin was your first president and your second president, and he was very on the ground floor of getting this organization going. 2 weeks ago, this came through my door. It's a history of pediatric and adult hearing screening. Bob is 88. He's missed 2 SENTAC meetings. didn't come to this one because he's frankly afraid of getting COVID. And I don't blame him. Octogenarians like myself do not do well with this disease. But I want you to please give Bob a round of applause for his service to this society. So finally, just 2 more slides and I am finished. I'd like to be by the sea because it really reminds me how truly insignificant I am. Or I could be up in the mountain. Doesn't matter. But I do like to be by the sea, and I have a little house in Cornwall, which is my mother's house, right very close to the sea. So retirement is good. This is my future. Retirement looks pretty good here, doesn't it, eh? I'm in the canoe. My wife is ahead of me paddling. We call this assisted living in the best form. We're active, we're traveling, we've got friends there. So that's where I am. I can reflect on a career which I have really enjoyed. I have really enjoyed my career. I have had no temptation whatever to go back into that hospital after the day I left. No temptation at all. I left on a Friday afternoon after doing that one case I was telling you. Had this pit in my stomach because I'd been there all week because people have been saying, what are you going to do? Well, men said, what are you going to do? Women said, how do you feel? Big difference. So I woke up the following morning, the pit had gone, and it's never come back. So retirement has been very good to me. I can reflect on a very happy career. And I think part of it, and a big part of it, is building teams. And I suspect, and I hope that part of the reasons that our fellowship graduates have done so well as being leaders is because they learned to build teams while we were in Cincinnati. So every voice counts. Thank you for the privilege of addressing you today. Thank you. I appreciate it.